Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the latter half of our Sunday at YORStory Festival. And we are here with Georgina Morley, who is an editor at Picador and who knows everything about non-fiction editing. And I should have pulled up her bio to tell you how many prizes her authors have won, partly because of her editing. There was lots of prizes, like the James Tate Prize. What other prizes have your books won, Georgina?
Over the years, the Duff Cooper Prize, James Tate Black, the Samuel Johnson Prize, which is now the Baillie Gifford Prize, and it's all down to the authors. It's not down to me.
But a few you've helped them on their way.
I've helped them on their way, yes.
So please, can you then tell me what it is you're saying that was all down to the authors, not you? What is it that you do then? What's the point of you?
Oh, Jesus. The point of me is to put it this way, I can't turn a pig's ear into a silk purse, but I can turn a pig's ear into a reasonably good market knockoff of a Gucci handbag. So, and if the book is good in the first place, then what I do is do my best to make it better. What it's about is taking an author's work and seeing where, if it needs to be made better, and then cracking on.
And how did you get into doing that? Because that wasn't on the options when I was at school for careers.
No, I mean, publishing is a well-kept secret in the career path, chiefly, I think, because it's pitifully, woefully badly paid, and therefore has been for a very, very, very long time the province of the middle classes. Not that that's changed hugely, though we are trying belatedly to do something about it in the industry. I did an English degree. And at university, I either wanted to work in arts admin, being, behind the scenes in a theatre or a gallery or something, or I wanted to work in publishing. I don't quite know how or why, because we didn't know anybody who was in publishing. My parents had lots of friends who were journos and lots of friends who were doctors, but no one in publishing. And then the first job I got after I graduated was as a secretary in a publisher's. Boom. However many years later it is now, a very great many. That was that.
And then that was you editing. And what did it make you feel like when you had that job? This is my job. This is what I really enjoy doing. Because it's not something that you can do unless you really like it.
No, and certainly because for a variety of reasons, despite being, in my 7th decade and having done this job for 4 million years, I still have essay crises, and I've had the mother of all essay crises this week, which has meant a series of extremely late nights sorting something out, which is now done. Hurrah, go me. But you're unfit for anything else. The people are nice, and actually on a good day, you get to go to work, talk to clever people who like books, about books, and you get to meet clever people who write books and talk to them about books, and talk to them about ideas, and talk to them about all sorts of things, and often have a very great deal to drink and a lot of laughs. And sometimes it's not quite so much fun, but, on a good day.
And what is it? So essentially, there's a thing I think that people don't understand, that with non-fiction, is everybody thinks that the author basically started at page 1 and finished at page 350, and you would turn around and say that's probably not how they've written that book.
No, I mean, most non-fiction is acquired on proposal. So someone has a bright idea, they go away and they write it down, and the proposal can be grotesquely inadequate and consist of a one-line pitch on a piece of paper, which is not much help to anybody, but if they're really, really famous and really, really clever, you might allow them to get away with it. Or it can be 100 pages, and it can be a fully fleshed out synopsis, chapter breakdown, and sample chapter. So then the author goes away and writes it. And then they give it to you, the editor, and you read it. And basically at that point, depending on how much work it needs, which can be anything from nothing to a very, very, very great deal, you shred it in the kindest way. You go through it and you think, well, that doesn't work and that doesn't work. My son, who's 23, when he was little, he did an impression of me working, which was to pick up a piece of paper and a crayon and go, And that was me. And I'd go, what are you doing, Charlie? And he'd go, Mama, working. Because, you know, what I was at that point doing was usually writing something disobliging in the margin, because this was the olden days. I cannot tell you the joy of track changes. I know they're a nightmare and they're horrible for everybody and they crash your computer. But not having to transfer your thoughts from an illegible scribble on a bit of printed out manuscript into a fully formed sentence that will actually enable the author to then look at that sentence and see what's wrong with it. The ability to do that on a laptop and a computer and say, not sure this works here, how about this? It transformed all our lives.
Really, I can imagine now I think about it, that must have actually been an incredibly complicated thing to do, to send things back and forth.
Oh God, it was a nightmare. And because, I mean, I can remember when I was first at Macmillan, which is the umbrella of Picador and an imprint in itself. But you know, there were books. There are at least 3 I can think of where the hapless author received 47-page editorial letters. And you had to type the bloody thing up.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. Whereas now, they may blench and weep bitter tears when they open the document because it's covered in track changes, but at least I haven't had to type it up, as well as having had the thought.
And what kind of things do you, I mean, someone has done a proposal, and that's what you're saying, is it also depends on how well they're known. So if someone isn't known, they really need to send you a series proposal with a sample chapter and the whole structure of what they're going to do. But once you've got this thing, I mean, what is it that do you rearrange things? What's the difference between, how would you approach it first? Once you've read it, once you've read what this person has sent you, what is the first thing that you then look for?
When this is a weird one, because you read very differently when you're acquiring from the way in which you read when you're editing. You know, when you're acquiring, it's about shopping. Do I like this? Would it look nice on my shelf? Do I think that the great British reading public want to read this book? And if you can answer all of those things positively, then you think, yeah, I'll buy this. And then you try to persuade your colleagues, and then you try to persuade the author and the agent to come to you rather than the umpteen other people they could go to. And then you chat. And then what sometimes happens after that is nothing for years, because they go away and write the book. And you don't hear from them, and they don't hear from you unless they want to. And so occasionally it's a check-in and a lunch and a this and a that and a the other. And then when they've finished and they send it in, what you're looking for at that point is, as I said earlier, so does it work? Does it work on its own terms? Is it doing what it set out to do? Does it conform to the proposal we saw? So if it was going to be, let's say for want of argument, a book about the development of printing in the Renaissance, does it start talking about writing systems in, you know, prehistoric America instead? Because actually, no, it's jolly interesting. I'm very glad you know that. Thank you. But we don't want to see it in this book. And then it's about the shape. It's about the overall architecture. Does it work? You know, is there a narrative arc? Does the story, whatever the story is, the story can be in nonfiction, which is one of the reasons I like it, because I actually really couldn't edit a novel if it hit me in the face. I can tell you what's wrong with a novel. That's easy. Fixing it, dear God, no, can't do it. Hugely admire all my dear friends who do that, but no, that ain't for me. My brain's too linear. But you look at it and you think, okay, so the arc's right, the shape is right. Then within that, do the individual chapters work? You know, does the one chapter lead nicely into the next? Does it end on a good note? Is the end punchy enough to make someone want to keep turning the page and read on? And I mean, once, many years ago, I was working with the late and wonderful Lisa Jardine, the historian, and we published Lisa's first trade book, Worldly Goods. And I'd read it, and I was editing it, and the end didn't work. The last chapter didn't work. It just didn't work. And so I wrote her the 47-page editorial letter, because it's that long ago. And then we met in my office and we stared at each other and went, it doesn't work, does it? And she went, no, it doesn't work. And we sat there a bit more. doesn't work. And we went for drinks and we came back. And then we suddenly, I think it was Lisa who said, what if we swap chapter 7 and chapter 8? Let's assuming those were the last chapters. And I went, oh, that might work. So literally we did. We took the pieces of paper, because we could in those days, and swapped them about. And then we sat there and we read it and it worked. I mean, there had to be some other stitching and some, you know, some tweaking here and there to make the flow work. But that was what had been wrong.
And why is it that you think people can't do that for themselves when they're writing, or are there some people that actually can do that for themselves?
There is no book published that wouldn't have profited from an editor, because you're too close to it. You're too close to it. And I mean, equally, I am often. I mean, if it's been a very intense edit, if a script has needed a lot of work for whatever reason, I mean, sometimes authors can structure, but they can't write a decent sentence. Sometimes they have beautiful, limpid sentences and they can't structure to save their lives. Sometimes they can do both. And I should, I mean, all these are extremes. I'm talking about extremes. You know, most people actually can do most of it brilliantly, but they need help because they get stuck. You get too close to stuff. If you've been researching something for 5 years or more, the huge danger, and particularly since everything went digital, including how we write, you know, nobody sits down with, well, actually they do, and many novelist friends of mine do. They sit down in pen and ink, and the first edit is when they type it up. Now, if you're not doing that, and you're typing it up, and you've got all your files, and you've got all your folders on your laptop, and you've got all your pages, you can't see it anymore. You think it's okay, and you've gone back, and yes, you've edited. I mean, the way you know, even writing a piece of cover copy, you know, which is what, 200 words, the blurb that goes on the front flap of a hardback or on the back of a paperback. You know, often that takes hours because you want to get the best of the book into these 200 words. You want to make people want to read it. So it's this sort of bastard form in that it's neither pure prose nor pure advertising copy. It's an unhappy marriage of them both, and you want to get it right, and that can take forever. And often, as an editor, you might say, and this is the one thing that's been hideous about, well, one of the many things that's been hideous about all of us working from home for a year, is you can't just turn to the guy next to you and say, I can't write this sentence, what do I do? Now that is what we do for authors on a grand scale. We look at it and we go, okay, it's really, really good, mostly, please God, it's really, really good, but that bit gets a bit boring. And then they'll go, yeah, but I like that bit. And you go, I know you like that bit, and you're right to like that bit, but it doesn't fit. You have to get rid of that bit. And the other thing to remember is it's their book. It's always their book. It's not your book. And that's where it can get complicated, particularly if you've been doing it for a long time, because you know what's going to make something better.
I've heard of authors bitching about their editors, that they want them to edit out into certain ways that they just don't agree with.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, sometimes you learn to pick your battles. You learn what is a major structural problem that will completely kibosh the book, you know, ruin it and make it not work and no one will buy it. Or you think, actually, yeah, okay, that's probably me rather than them. You know, other people won't care. I care, but it won't matter. But there's nothing that curdles an editor's breakfast toast in the stomach on a Saturday morning opening a paper than, the review that says, why, oh, why was this book not edited? At which point you bang your head on the kitchen table going, if only you knew.
They wouldn't let me.
They wouldn't let me. No, literally, a colleague once skipped into my office clutching a copy of the TLS, saying, look, you were right. I said, this is of no comfort to me, because we published the book.
So it's still got my name on it.
And it's got my name in the acknowledgements, which is fine, and I'm very grateful. But it would have been so much better if
they had just let you do what you wanted.
Yeah. But you have to park that, because it's their book, and actually it's their name on the cover, and it's their earnings, it's their income, it's their
And
life.
also, I mean, how do you have to do with authors? You have to do a lot of kind of babysitting. It's not ego massaging is too strong a word. Sometimes just looking after and reassuring, because it isn't like writing a book is not like making a photocopier.
No, it's not. And it's again, and that's a thing you have to remember, because I think, as anyone watching this will already have worked out, I'm not the world's most patient person, which in some respects makes me a very, very bad editor indeed. But you have to remember, they're sitting alone in their study or at their kitchen table, and they've worked on this thing for years and years and years, and they care about it, and it's their baby. And so anything you do to it is almost, could be construed as an act of violence. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And sometimes the reaction is a proxy for different anxiety, for another anxiety. I mean, I once had a thing where, actually, it wasn't my edit. My edit went fine. My 6 edits on this particular book went fine. It was the copy edit, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, but the editor does the big edit, which does involve, possibly amending sentences, tweaking punctuation so that the cadence is better, sorting out the structure. So all the big stuff. But then the copy edit is when it's marked up for press. So the copy editor inserts all the relevant symbols and bits and bobs and code these days that the typesetters need, but they also iron out bad syntax, grammatical infelicities. They can't fact check, because we can't fact check everything, because we're not experts. But if you know that D-Day was in 1944 and the authors said it was 1947, you can fix that one. All that stuff is done. So the copy edit, which was the lightest copy edit I've ever seen, occasioned an absolute howl of pain. I mean, really seriously bad. And both his agent and I were going, I don't get it. So he came in, and the book was about something very, very sensitive that had happened in his life. It was a memoir, and it was a dreadful thing that had happened. And I suddenly, when we were sitting there and he was being really snarky about the copy edit, and I suddenly thought, oh, it's not about the copy edit, is it? It's because this is the first sign that the book is going beyond you and beyond me, and you trust me now, but it's going out into the world, and people are going to read this story, and people are going to have views on this story that you mightn't like. And so it was a proxy. It's a proxy for anxiety. So yeah, you are a bizarre mix of sort of jolly lunch pal in the old days, in the normal world, chief cook and bottle washer, school bully, head girl, mother figure, and unpaid psychotherapist. And any or all of these might be required on the same day and in the same telephone call.
And I mean, you must still love it though. I mean, you must love working with an author, knowing that you've helped them make something much better.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. And it's. I mean, there's also the sort of hideously petty joy of seeing a newspaper review praising someone's felicitous prose and think, hang on a minute, I think I wrote that sentence, and then going back and finding what you did, which I agree. This is not.
Do the editors have like a wee kind of folder in their computers, like they get out at parties and print out for editors' parties to go, these are the reviews for my sentences?
We don't do that, but we do have very long memories, and we do think, oh yeah, okay. Or you have delightful moments, as I did a couple of years ago at Edinburgh at the festival, where I was there with two of my authors had events on the same day, and one came to the later event with me, the other author's event, and then we all had dinner. Back in the normal times.
I remember them.
Oh God, there was drink, there were chips, there was talk, there were people we weren't married to, related to, any all of the above. Anyway, and one author turned to the other author and rather embarrassingly, but I'd had a bit by then, so it was all right, said, oh, she's good, isn't she? She's good. And my other author said, yeah, she's very good. And then said, by the way, I haven't told you this yet. And I went, yeah, what? And I said, when I was reading the audio book, you know that bit you wanted me to cut that I said I wanted to keep? And I went, yeah, that I let you keep and you kept. And she went, yeah. So I realised when I was reading the audio book that actually you were right and it should have gone. and that was just, and it was so sweet of her, A, to say it, B, gloriously smug making for me. Though that's not the point, but it was just, but you know, there are, but equally, as I keep saying, you have to, you can't, it's not about you imposing your will on them. It's about you going, if you do it this way, it will be better. And with authors whose first book it is, especially, whatever, you know, they might be emeritus professor of something unbelievably arcane and intelligent that I don't understand. But that doesn't matter. What matters is, does their book work?
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't work, what are we going to do to make it work so that you and anyone else watching this who shells out their hard-earned money for it rather than a bottle of gin enjoys it, or isn't snagged on things that make them go, what? And you know, you don't want the whole thing to be smooth because that would be boring, but you want it to work on whatever its own terms are, and every book's different. Mm-hmm. So the fundamental principles are the same, and you learn them on the job. You learn them as you go. I mean, there's no edit. Well, there is editing school. There are courses, but you know, actually, that's not what you do. You learn. I mean, the most useful editing trick, which I have passed on with tedious frequency to any number of young people who've had the misfortune to come into my orbit who want to be editors, is something that was passed to me by my late great mentor Peter Carson, who was then editor-in-chief of Penguin, the cleverest man alive. I mean, though he is no longer with us, but then was. And Peter gave me, the first thing I had to do as his minion was cut a book. I'd never cut a book. I copy edited a book. I didn't know how to cut a book. And I sort of obviously looked as startled as I felt. And he said, do what my great friend John Guest said to me, which is cut a line a page. If you can't cut a line on that page, cut 2 lines on the next page. If you can't cut 2 lines on that page, cut 3 lines on the next page. And it's mechanistic and it's brutal and it stops you screaming and it gives you a way in. Because
isn't that true of kind of all essays, or even, you know, I mean, even something nowadays like Facebook posts need editors are kind of like going, you know, you've got 10 lines here and you could have said this in 4. Just take all those lines out. Like, you've lost me at line 4. I know it's only 10 lines, but I'm not interested anymore because you've rambled too much.
Yeah. But then, yes, exactly. And I mean, you know, and I know one of my besetting sins in writing anything is I love a parenthetical subclause. I spent more time in a finals exam 4 million years ago polishing my parenthetical subclauses.
Can you explain what a parenthetical subclause is?
Okay. So you've got a sentence. I'm not going to be able to find one. I should have done homework. I should have actually brought one with me to show and tell. I mean, a room full of books. Can't find any. But basically, you've got a sentence to say, you know, once upon a time, and then you could have dash. It wasn't that long ago, dash. Jane was walking up the hill. You have to figure this is terrible because I'm doing this on the hoof. Was walking up the hill, comma. It was a very tall hill, comma. So I like those little interpolations in a sentence that give you a little bit that aren't actually what it's about. They're not actually germane to the sentence, but they're a little frill, they're a little flourish, and they can get really, really, really irritating. But I know I like them, and I have to watch out for that. You know, so it's but equally the other thing is the thing you watch out for as an editor with an author. There will often be a word or a phrase, and they found it and they cling on to it, and it comes up paragraph after paragraph. And again, now it's really easy because you can be really, really brutal and say to them, you use the word splendid 47 times in 3 pages. Because you can show them.
Are you finding now that people can find all those kind of things out for themselves, is people's writing getting more verbose or less? Are people editing because they can use editing software, or are they just not? Or are you just having other problems with people instead?
bit of both. I mean, I don't think you can edit your own work in the end. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? It's my job. Bread in the bone. I have to justify my existence. And sometimes, believe me, there are manuscripts that are pretty much perfect. And so you sort of make a few slightly snippy comments or praising, but, you know, oh, what do you think about doing here? And it's only to justify your existence, because so that they feel they know you read it. Because it could have gone, you could have slapped covers on it, it would have been fine. But I think word processing as an entity has changed writing, yes, because people can be more prolix and they can wang on for much, much longer because their fingers aren't getting tired. Literally, it's literally that simple. And I think also it's much harder. You know, I mean, I'm going to say the way you, but it might not be you and it might not be anybody else watching. But I know for myself, I read differently in a book than I do on screen, and than I do with a Kindle book. I don't read in the same way because I can't feel it on the page in the same way. I mean, I know in a novel or even a work of history that if I'm 3/4 of the way in, I know how much exposition there's going to be, or if there's going to be a twist, where that twist will probably come, whether it's, you know, a plot twist in a crime novel, or whether it's, you know, a change in direction in a non-fiction piece. But on a Kindle you can't, you know, saying 25%. I mean, okay, you're a quarter of the way through the book, but it doesn't give you the same thing. And I think typing is like that too. You know, you're typing away like a mad thing, and out it's all pouring. But you're perhaps not being as considered as you would be if you had to do it in the old-fashioned way.
If you either had to do it by hand on a piece of paper because it takes longer, or you had to do it on a typewriter and you'd have to typex out every word that you didn't want.
Yeah. I mean, though I also think, I mean, this is just, you know, old git moaning, really, in many respects, because the world's changed. I mean, you know, the idea that kids would write an essay now with a pen and ink beyond the 5th year is more or less gone. But that's what I did 3 essay subjects at A-level, and then I did an essay subject at university. You know, it's endless screeds of adolescent outpourings, my thoughts on Macbeth. But it's changed, so we just we change the way we do it, and what you have to try to hang on to is the sense of what the overall shape is. I mean, there are editors I know who still print everything out and write it in ink, and then either they, or more often they, get a junior person to type in the comments and send them to the author.
But I could also understand exactly why you do that, because it is quite a different experience to do stuff on a screen and to actually have it in print. I mean, it's just a different experience. And I think, you know, they'll always be side by side. So one of the things we wanted to talk about when you were talking about acquisitions, what is sort of the process for acquisitions apart from will this sell? Because if it was only will this sell, then basically there was, I don't know what we'd be full of now, but like say 5 years ago, everything that was published would have been a celebrity memoir or autobiography, everything.
There's always going to be those though. I mean, all you've got to do is look at, you know, remember one's parents' bookshelves, or, you know, your grandparents' bookshelves, and assuming they had them, and you know, I mean, some of the rubbish on my mum's bookshelves, you know, and you think, what is this terrible novel written in 1942? Well, of course we've never heard of it, because but it was a massive bestseller then. So there's always going to be that. But I think what you're trying to do, there's lots of things going on when you're acquiring. The first thing is, do I like it? And if I like it, can I communicate that enthusiasm to anybody else, or is this just a me thing? If it's just a me thing, you have to be a bit more careful. You also have to be a bit more careful if it's just my friends would buy this thing. You know, one of the things we say to young colleagues a lot is, your mates is not a market. I mean, it might be, you know, there's a Venn diagram, And it might be a market, but it's not really a market. What you need to do is, okay, where is this book going to sit in the bookshop? Who's going to review it? What are the outlet? What are the ways and means by which we can communicate this book to the outside world so that they're going to give us stuff about it and want to pay money for it and want to read it, and then having read it, like it enough to tell their friends. And it's a dark art, and there are no hard and fast rules. We turn down really, really, really good books all the time. My mum had a great friend who worked for Decca Records in the 60s. He turned down the Beatles, epic mistake. But everybody turned down the Beatles except George Martin, and the same is true of any scratch a bestseller. The Hare with Amber Eyes, Edmund de Val's wonderful, wonderful memoir of his family. His Viennese family, was turned down by, I think, everyone in London until clever Clara Farmer at Chatto saw it and thought, there's something here. And she acquired it, and it was a massive bestseller. And the great, you can't predict publishing. You think you can. We like to think there is some knowledge. It's not just this, though there's a lot of that. But it's so having got to, so you go through all these various stages and you pass the hurdles, and the final hurdle is the horrid bit of paper with the numbers on it. So, your sales colleagues put in projections of what they think will sell, and you print that out, and the computer algorithm works out the percentages it's making and the profit it makes, if any, the amount of money it loses, often quite a lot. And we go to a big meeting with all the big cheeses in the company. And they go, well, why on earth do you want to buy this book? Look, it doesn't make any money at all. And that's when the other bits come in. That's when okay, but it's brilliant for this reason, this reason, and this reason. I think it will win a prize. I think that the market is moving towards being interested in this subject or that subject or the other subject. I'm a British non-fiction publisher, so the Nazis and the Tudors are my lifeblood. If I never edit another book about the Second World War, I will not cry, except one may come in and it'll be so brilliant that I will want to edit it. And obviously I have several coming in the next little while because it's the war and it's the UK. But so there's all these things, and then you think, okay, this is something completely new, and then you might be allowed to take a punt. I was allowed to take a punt a very, very, very long time ago on a book called King Leopold's Ghost by a man called Adam Hochschild, and it was my first New York trip, which was very exciting. And I met Adam's agent. I was told about it by Adam's publisher, who I'd met, endless meetings all day with lots of publishers. And then I saw his agent, and then I got the proposal, and I took it back to the office in London, and I said, please let me buy this book. And I was allowed to buy it for not very much money, because there were sort of general rumblings from, senior men. It's always senior men saying, don't think so, it's set in Africa. No. And I said, no, look, this book matters. Now, my career, like any editor's, is littered with failure because most things don't work. Most things work enough that you're not fired, and some things work really, really well. But there's an awful lot of failure in any quasi-artistic creative business. And Adam's book is still in print, and that book was first published in, I think it was 1990 something. And if any of you haven't read it, I urge you to read it. It's just extraordinary. It's about bad King Leopold of the Belgians and the depredations he wrought in the Congo, and the campaign to expose what was happening in the Congo, which was led by Stanley, who discovered Livingstone, and a young journalist who worked out that the ships that were going in to the Congo with goods were coming out with nothing on them. And what was that all about? And it was the first international human rights campaign. And it's not a cheerful read, because it's an appalling event. Thousands of people died cruelly, but it's a brilliant book. And that was a punt. King Leopold's Ghost.
King Leopold's Ghost.
Yeah.
And
So
that's us, nearly finished. So if you want to sum up what you were going to say.
Editors are very important and mostly lovely, even when cross.
That is a very, very good point. And if you want to be almost sure of being published and sold in the UK, write about the Nazis or write about the Tudors. And if somehow you can do a non-fiction book that includes both the Nazis and the Tudors, that is... You never know.
But don't send it to me, please.
Don't send it to George, but I'm sure somebody will actually want to buy a non-fiction book that somehow mixes the Tudors and the Nazis, and that gives you a guaranteed money, publishing money in Britain. But there are possibly easier ways to make money than trying to shoehorn the Nazis and the Tudors into a non-fiction book.
I think that might be.
I might now go and propose the Nazi the Nazi tendencies of Henry VIII or something like that. That would be great. But I have to tell you, I have 2 book proposals for you from our previous guests.
Okay.
Julie Bindle would like to write a book that is entitled "I Am Not Julie Birchall," which has been her weekend.
Yes, fair enough. A wise book to write, I feel. And
Ian Martin has a proposal for a book about swearing, which is mostly things, whole chapters like the Psalms that got dropped because they were too dirty, the fucking gospel that everybody forgot about, and Paradise Fucked instead of Paradise Lost. So he has apparently got an entire book proposal that he forgot about, and I promised him I'd tell you.
Well, you can tell him to send it me. That I follow Ian on Twitter with great glee, and I would very happily read it. I'm not necessarily going to publish it, but I'd very happily read it.
Well, he also, so that's my book pitch for you. I Am Not Julie Birchall by Julie Bindle and Ian's Paradise Fucked. But thank you very much, Georgina. That has been fantastic. That was really, really informative and really interesting. And I hope it has given a lot of the viewers a really much clearer idea of what an editor does and what happens in non-fiction, which I think is a mystery to a lot of people and now is a lot less.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks so much, George. Bye.
Bye.